My name is Karen Rowell, and I lead the mental health team here at FUS. We chose today to come to you because of International Self-Care Day, an observance that's been around for about 10 years. They chose the date of 7/24 because if you engage in good self-care, the benefits can be experienced 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We always hear, first slide please. We always hear on airplanes how you're supposed to put your own oxygen mask on before helping others. Well, that's the gist of self-care. You take some time to care for yourself, and then you're better able to help others when they need you. Slides off. I'll tell you a story about my own struggles with mental health and things I've learned about how to take care of myself. My depression started in my early 20s when I was in graduate school. Stress and sleep deprivation were surely involved. I had ups and downs with my mood over the next decade, got help from therapy, and started an antidepressant in my late 30s. By the time I hit my 40s, other more physical symptoms started cropping up or getting worse, and I was fortunate to make the connection between some of those symptoms and eating certain foods. When just a few months on a gluten-free, dairy-free diet facilitated a substantial remission in just about all of my symptoms, including the depression, I was able to go off medication in 2013. At times since then, I've come close to going back to medication, especially over the last few years as I witnessed my son's struggles with bipolar and substance use disorders. So far, the lifestyle changes and self-care practices that I chose to educate myself about and participate in have kept me functioning well enough without meds. Now, I'm not implying that it should be a goal for everyone to not take meds. That's just something that I personally was hoping I could achieve. Next slide. One source that was instrumental in my self-care journey was the 2009 book, The Depression Cure, by clinical psychologist Stephen Ilardi. This book planted the seeds for what I call my ancestral health worldview. The idea that how our ancestors lived can inform us about the lifestyle practices that might be more health-promoting for us today. Dr. Ilardi writes, "Human beings were never designed for the poorly nourished, sedentary, indoor, sleep-deprived, socially isolated, frenzied pace of 21st century life." He put forth a 6-part therapeutic lifestyle change program, a framework that has guided my path toward wellness in some way or another over the last 15 or so years. In the interest of time, I'm only going to be talking about 2 of these components, sleep and sunlight exposure. They are things we don't hear about nearly as often as diet and exercise. And I'm not saying that diet and exercise are not important. I'm just saying we just don't talk about these things enough. A more recent read in my self-care journey is Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep from 2017. Dr. Walker is the director of Berkeley's Center for Human Sleep Science, and he says very simply, sleep is the single most effective thing we can do to reset our brain and body health each day. When I think about the pillars of health that have been put forth by health experts, diet, exercise, stress reduction, sleep, the research Dr. Walker discusses in this book convinced me, a registered dietitian, that getting an adequate quantity and quality of sleep is probably the most important pillar of health. And I'll insert here, I just heard in a podcast this morning on my morning walk that you don't really know what good sleep is until you get it. So many of us may be thinking that we're sleeping okay, but we're not. So sleep is really important, and I feel like our cultural obsession with complicated diet and exercise routines really misses the mark. One mental health benefit of sleep that Walker relates is our ability to manage emotions. Studies have shown that sleep disruption is linked to suicidal thoughts, attempts, and completions in adolescence. It's linked to aggression, bullying, and behavioral problems in kids. And it's linked to violence in adult prison populations. If we have any hope to remain resilient in the face of all the stressors in our world today, and if we have any hope to fight the growing anxiety and depression so many of us are experiencing, we have to get good sleep. Now let's turn our attention to sunlight. Dr. Ilardi's 2009 book mainly talked about sunlight with respect to its ability to promote vitamin D synthesis. Since then, significant work has been done in circadian biology, showing us that sunlight exposure affects our health and mood in more ways than just through vitamin D. Psychology Today published this article in 2022, covering a large research study that showed the benefits of getting more sunshine for mood. The first two key points up on the slide establish that this study is about circadian rhythm disruption that arises from the artificial lighting we spend so much time in, not about vitamin D. And as the third bullet states, the study of over 500,000 people showed that each additional hour spent outdoors significantly lowered odds of becoming depressed. The author goes on to explain that there are light-sensing cells in our retina, different from the rods and cones that tell our brains what we're seeing. These light-sensing cells communicate with multiple brain regions that are associated with the control of circadian rhythms, as well as the control of mood. So sunlight, again, can enhance mood in ways that have nothing to do with vitamin D. Optometrist and quantum biology expert Dr. Valerie Giangrande has used some really cute graphics on her Instagram account to explain some mechanisms for how sunlight can affect our mood. Here she shows that when ultraviolet A light enters our eyes, it helps create the neurotransmitters serotonin and dopamine from the amino acids present in the retina. Sunlight can also promote the production of beta endorphins. All of these chemicals have positive effects on our mood, and they are being created when our sunlight enters our eyes. Now, if you're not impressed by the Instagram graphics of the quantum eye doc, then consider the results of the following research studies. The first study from 2017 was done in a hospital psychiatric unit where patient rooms faced either southeast or northwest, and the southeast rooms received far more daylight. They collected data on their patients for a whole year and found that the length of stay for patients in the southeast rooms was about half that of the patients in the northwest rooms. And we're not talking about 3 days versus 6 days here. The difference was 29 days versus 58 days. Here we can see the very positive effect of light exposure during the day on mental health. In the second study from 2023, close to 88,000 people had their light exposure tracked throughout day and night, and they were tracked on wristbands. It wasn't self-report. And then they were followed for 6 years to look at their health outcomes. With respect to mental health, the people with the most nighttime light exposure had 30% more major depressive disorders, PTSD, self-harm, and psychosis. The people with the least exposure to light during the day also had an increase in these same illnesses. So the second study shows the negative effects of getting insufficient light during the day and excessive light at night. And this might be a good place to insert that after the 1970s energy crisis, many building managers reduced the intensity of our indoor lighting. So since the 70s, we've gotten even less light during the day. Now, I should point out that those two studies are observational, so the results can generate hypotheses, not conclusions. But I will share that for the last 4 months, I've been wearing my blue blockers in the evenings and doing more work on my laptop outside whenever it's practical. Some of you have been on Zoom meetings with me outside. I definitely think my mood and sleep have improved. For the first time in my entire adulthood, I've had many days of waking before my alarm. The final book I want to share with you is The Light Doctor by Dr. Martin Moore-Eade. He's a leading researcher in circadian sciences who spent 25 years at Harvard and is now putting his expertise into developing healthy circadian lights. This book is brand new, just released on July 2nd, and I devoured it over July 4th weekend. So I haven't had the chance to look for a lot of corroborating sources yet, and I'm really hoping to actually talk to some of our climate justice team members about this book in the near future. So to keep this short, I'll simply share a timeline that the author puts forth in his book. Multicellular life evolved millions of years ago in the oceans where blue light penetrates the deepest. Those sea creatures regulated their circadian clocks by blue light, and most of their descendants, including us, still do today. Now, in 2014, a Nobel Prize was awarded for the energy-saving blue pump LED lights. And LED use rose from 1% of lighting sales in 2013 to over 70% in 2023. Unfortunately, it was 3 years later that a Nobel Prize was awarded to the team that showed that our circadian clocks can be disrupted by blue light. When you hear about the problems caused by blue light, it's not just our devices that we need to manage. We have to rethink our light diet as well. Exposure to blue light within an hour or two of bedtime can suppress melatonin production and contribute to insufficient and/or poor quality sleep. And again, when sleep is disrupted, so is our ability to regulate our emotions. So many stressful things have happened in the last decade. Road rage, shootings, political animosity. But I myself can't help but wonder if our ability to handle stress and difficult emotions has gotten worse too. Thanks to Jay's wonderfully creative idea, you'll all have the opportunity to work on your own haiku in a bit. I will share my parting advice to you in mine. Eat whole foods, just move. Dark nights, sun snacks all day long. Make sleep number one.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sandy Martin, and I'm going to be presenting on what might be a next step for you, or some things to consider. I'm a mental health therapist. I've been practicing for 14 years now, and my specialties are anxiety, depression, trauma, and I have a real passion for helping people to heal mental health. So I'd like to present an analogy for you first. And I think it's important because many people don't recognize how important taking care of one's mental health is. If a person is suffering from arthritis, and it's this nagging, if not overwhelming pain every day, maybe once in a while they get relief. Who knows why? They just do. They'll consider going to a physician, to their primary doctor, and telling them about how it's hurting them, how it's interfering with things that they really want to do. And let's say that person went to their friend and they're just complaining, rightly so, about how this arthritis is just becoming debilitating. The friend would say, well, of course you should go to your doctor, find out what's going on. Maybe you can get some relief. Well, I say the same for mental health. Of course, you need to go to a doctor, to a therapist, or a psychiatrist, or some person that might be able to provide resources, much less relief for those mental health symptoms. And it does involve acknowledging the pain, the suffering, or the discomfort. And maybe some of the things I'll be able to provide for you today will tell you what might seem normal and what might be healthier. And I can tie that to my own personal story with mental health. I didn't know what normal was. And I hesitate using the word normal because anything outside of normal can make a person seem like the other, but people do use the term quite a bit. So for me, it was normal to have sad thoughts most days, or it would be normal for me to have a lot of negative thinking. And it wasn't until I was 30 years old. Now, granted, these thoughts really began as an adolescent, probably in 6th or 7th grade. 30 years old, I'm at my partner's therapist. We're having a couple of couples therapy sessions. And I was telling the therapist how I was feeling and how hopeless I was feeling about not only the relationship, but about life. And just like, I just couldn't do it anymore. And she turns to me and she literally pointed her finger at me. She said, "And you're depressed." And I was like, I am. I really had no idea. I thought everybody else just went through life hopeless. You know, maybe not every day, maybe not every week, but when it happened, it would stick with me for days and weeks. And so that just opened doors for me. I went to therapy. My therapist recommended this book, which I still have, how many years later that is, Breaking the Patterns of Depression. And I just consumed this book. And I was like, wow, other people went through the same thing I went through? I can't believe it. And it helped me a lot, and seeing the therapist. And then it's been a journey ever since then. It's not been a steady road, but bit by bit, my life, my mental health has become better. And learning about oneself is so important, and how you can improve your life. And that's part of why I think it's so important to take care of yourself, and it takes care of others while you're taking care of yourself. So, what are the patterns to look for? Figuring out the point when a person might need to see a professional. If you go through the criteria of mental health symptoms, which I'll do for depression and anxiety in a moment here, consider 2 weeks minimum of experiencing the symptoms most days. It doesn't have to be every single day, 14 days in a row. Maybe you'll get a break a day, but then you'll go back to feeling the way you were. 2 weeks of symptoms. Also consider when those symptoms are affecting your routines. You're not interested in doing the things that you usually like to do, or you don't like to reach out and talk to people. You're just not getting the same enjoyment out of your usual activities. And you might be able to notice how your own behaviors are affecting others around you, whether that be irritability or just be feeling really down and negative. One screening tool is the PHQ-9. And yes, I realize that the type is very small when it gets up on the screen. I will have copies of this down for the noon programming. But the PHQ-9, you may have already come across when you visit your physician. They use it as a pretty quick screening tool for depression, and keeping in mind that depression and anxiety often go hand in hand. So some of these might also sound like things that you look for anxiety. Little interest or pleasure in doing things. Number 2 is feeling down, depressed, or hopeless. Number 3, trouble falling or staying asleep, or sleeping too much. The fourth is feeling tired or having little energy. 5, poor appetite or overeating. 6, feeling bad about yourself. 7, trouble concentrating. 8, moving or speaking slowly, so slowly that other people notice. And 9, thoughts that you would be better off dead or hurting yourself. Let me pause, and I probably needed to give a trigger warning for people who may be already experiencing these. Please take care of yourself if this is triggering for you. So the PHQ-9 lists some symptoms to think about. Anxiety, I keep a list in my mind when I'm seeing clients, and many of these I experienced. I'm one of those people who experienced the anxiety and depression hand in hand. So I distinctly remember, even till now, having the butterflies in my stomach or the nausea or just the tension, the tightness in my stomach. That's anxiety. Having the racing heartbeat, that can be anxiety. Having racing thoughts, like you just are unable to keep the thoughts under control or stop the thoughts. Like, okay, now it's time for me to go to sleep. But I can't stop thinking about this. I can't stop thinking about that. And just going on and spiraling. Also, sweating, or some people have reported feeling sort of electricity under their skin. That's your system telling you you're on high alert. So think about these and take care of yourself. And if you ever wonder, oh, it's too late, I've just been living with this for years, if not decades, and it's just something I have to deal with. I would argue, no, you don't have to live with it. Wouldn't it be nice, even if it were 1 more year or 10 years, that you didn't have to experience those symptoms? I think that would be wonderful. You don't have to continue living with it. One concern I've heard many times is, well, I just know I'm not going to be able to get in to see a therapist. I tried calling several places, and there was an 8-week wait time. Well, currently, I think that those wait times are much less. I think it's more typical now to have to wait maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And here's some ideas to start that process. I would, if you have health insurance, most plans cover mental health now, in great part thanks to Paul Wellstone many, many years ago. Start with your insurance plan to see what your mental health benefits are. And they might even, your insurance company might even have a list of local therapists that you can call, and you can get that list. You can use search engines, such as on Psychology Today, a platform called Mental Health Match, and you can filter the therapist by the diagnosis or by location or by insurance. All of those are very helpful. Any person that you find, no matter what search engine, including Google, send the therapist an email, and the majority will tell you if they take your insurance, what their waiting time is. So please reach out. Take that first step. I will say that most, especially if they're in private practice, such as myself, most do take what's called private pay. You're just paying out of your pocket. You may or may not get it reimbursed by insurance. Most therapists take private pay, and I think that the typical fee for that is $100 to $200 per hour session, which may be a possibility for some people. And other resources, I'll just mention, I will be at the noon programming and can give people more information then at the noon programming. But other supportive and resources are NAMI, which is the National Association for Mental Illness, Mental Health Connect, which Karen has been an ambassador from FUS to Mental Health Connect. She's been attending the meetings. They have a person called a navigator, and you can call them. We usually have tear-off sheets on the bulletin boards. We'll make sure that those are still on the bulletin boards, but you can call them to find out more about ways to get help. And also the National Institutes on Mental Health. Their website has a lot of information about symptoms and different resources. I realize this was a very brief introduction to seeking help, recognizing when you might need more help. And I just want to stress that there is this interconnectedness of mind and body and spirit, self-care. Taking care of yourself, it helps you and it helps those around you. Thank you.